The air in the United Nations General Assembly Hall was dead. It was the quiet of a tomb, a vacuum that swallowed sound. Yuna Kim stood at the podium, her knuckles white where they gripped the smooth wood. On her screen, the translation of the final terms glowed. Behind her, the representatives of Earth sat frozen. Before her, shimmering into existence with a soft hum, was the emissary. It was not a being but a projection, a form of shifting light and geometric shapes meant to be neutral, but it felt deeply cold. Its voice, translated through countless systems, echoed in the hall and in billions of ears worldwide. It was flat. It was final. The Galactic Council, it stated, has reviewed the case of Sol 3, Earth. Your species' rapid, unregulated expansion beyond your home gravity well constitutes a Class 7 chaotic incursion. You have trespassed into stabilized zones. You have ignited fusion drives in protected stellar nurseries. You have broadcast your existence with no regard for silent protocols. Yuna listened, her face a mask of professional calm. She was an astrophysicist before she was a diplomat. She had dreamed of the stars. Now they were accusing her people of touching them too loudly. The emissary continued. The Council's law is ancient. It exists to prevent conflict, to guide young species toward order. Humanity has shown a distinct lack of order. Therefore, the judgment is as follows. A list materialized in the air above the emissary, written in stark, clear symbols that every screen on Earth translated instantly. 1. All interstellar-capable vessels will be surrendered at the coordinates provided. Their drives will be rendered inert. 2. All research into faster-than-light physics, directed energy, and mass-driver weaponry will cease. All data will be surrendered. 3. A council governor will be installed to oversee a period of reorientation. This period will last 200 of your years. 4. Humanity will remain within the orbit of its fourth planet, Mars. A soft, collective gasp rustled through the hall. Someone choked back a sob. Yuna did not blink. These terms, the emissary said, are non-negotiable. They are the path to peace and eventual inclusion within the galactic community. Accept them and you will be protected. You will be guided. The projection seemed to focus on Yuna. Envoy Kim, you will deliver your species compliance in 30 of your planetary rotations. This is a generous time frame. Yuna found her voice. It was drier than she expected. And the alternative? If we cannot reach a consensus, or require more time to discuss. The emissary did not hesitate. The word it used was soft, but it landed like a hammer. Erasure. It let the silence hang for 3 full seconds. A peaceful dismantling of your industrial and technological base. A return to a pre-stellar state. Your planet will be quarantined for its own safety. No life will be intentionally harmed. It is a merciful option to prevent the greater chaos your species would inevitably bring. The Council does not wage war. It preserves peace. Yuna felt the words like physical blows. Peaceful dismantling. Erasure. They were talking about extinguishing their future, their dreams, their identity. Turning Earth into a museum of primitives. It was a death sentence for their spirit. She looked down at her pad. The formal document had appeared. It required her biometric signature to begin the compliance clock. Her hand hovered over the scanner. Her mind raced. She thought of her parents in Busan, of her brother piloting a construction shuttle near Jupiter. She thought of the first image of a black hole, a project she had worked on. All of it gone. Rendered down to nothing. For the crime of being too eager, too loud, too human. She looked up, not at the emissary, but at the cameras. At the faces of the representatives behind her. She saw terror. She saw fury. She saw defeat. This was not a negotiation. This was a dictate from a power so far beyond them it viewed humanity as a messy child to be corrected. The promise of eventual inclusion was a lie. She felt it in her bones. A species that would threaten this was not offering a hand. It was offering a cage. Her thumb pressed against the scanner. A soft light glowed green. The 30-day countdown, displayed in bold, universal numerals, appeared on every screen across the planet. The document is received, the emissary intoned. The process is begun. Choose wisely, humanity. The projection flickered and vanished. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, the noise erupted. Shouts, arguments, cries of despair. Diplomats surged to their feet, yelling at each other at Una, at the empty space where the emissary had been. Una did not move. She stared at the now blank space. The weight of the world was on her shoulders, but a colder, harder feeling was forming in her chest. It was not fear. It was the first quiet spark of something else. A refusal. She gathered her pad, the one that now held the sentence of her species. She turned and walked slowly from the podium, through the chaos. Her heels clicked on the floor, a small, steady sound against the roar. She had delivered the threat. Now she had to deliver the answer. But what answer could there be to a power that could erase you without firing a shot? Outside, the sky over New York was a clear, ordinary blue. The sun shone. People went about their day. For a few more moments, the world was still the same. But Una knew, as she looked up at that familiar sky, that everything had just changed forever. The clock was ticking. The silence in June's small Taejeon apartment was heavy. The screen on his wall was off now, a dark rectangle. He could still see the symbols of the ultimatum hanging in the air. He was a materials engineer. He solved problems of stress, of heat, of structural failure. This was a problem with no clear solution, only a terrible choice. His phone buzzed. Messages flooded in from family, from friends in his research lab. Panic, questions, theories. He ignored them. His mind was stuck on one thing. The emissary's voice saying peaceful erasure. It was a clean, simple phrase. It sounded almost medical. But in June's world, you did not cleanly erase a complex structure. You broke it. You melted it down. You reduced it to base components. He made tea, the routine movement calming. As the water heated, his personal computer, a secure system separate from the main network, chimed with a unique sound. It was the sound for a priority message from his brother, Min. Min was a pilot not for the military but for the Civilian Orbital Construction Guild. He was currently on a long-duration shift at the Mars Orbital Station, helping to build the new deep space communication array. Their messages were often delayed by minutes. This one was marked with the highest encryption level, a protocol they had set up for emergencies, joking it would only be for a family crisis. This was a family crisis, for the whole human family. June opened the message. It was not a video. It was text, raw data packets, and a few lines of Min's terse writing. June, they are lying. The peaceful erasure protocol is not new. We've been analyzing old galactic debris in the asteroid belt for months. Found a consistent signature. Council-style energy scarring on derelict tech, but no blast marks. We called it the Quiet Graveyard. A series of files followed. Spectral analyses. Scans of strange crystalline metal fragments that showed signs of precise, non-destructive molecular disassembly. Today, after the broadcast, I cross-referenced. The signature matches a debris field in the Lyra system, catalogued by the Council as former site of Talsin sovereignty neutralized. I pulled historical data. The Talsin were declared peacefully realigned 500 years ago. But our scans show their last orbital habitats were taken apart, piece by piece, like a machine being disassembled for scrap. No weapons fire, just taking apart. June's eyes scanned the data. His engineer's mind understood it immediately. This wasn't war. It was systematic dismantling. It was the removal of capability. Min's final line was simple. They didn't die in a fight. They were made helpless. Then something else got them. Plague? Starvation? The record stops. Prove it. Tell Una. Tell everyone. June's hands were steady as he saved the data. The feeling in his chest solidified from dread into a cold, sharp focus. This was the problem he could work on. Not the politics, not the fear. The evidence. He began to work. He was not a historian or a hacker, but he knew systems. He knew how to find connections. He reached out not through official channels, but through the quiet back channels of the global scientific community. He sent coded messages to a former professor in Oslo, a data archaeologist in Mumbai, a linguist in Chile who specialized in decoding ancient symbols. The response was not immediate agreement. It was suspicion, fear. But he sent Min's data. The spectral signature of the quiet graveyard was undeniable. The professor in Oslo confirmed the energy pattern was consistent with a known council technology used for resource reclamation. The data archaeologist in Mumbai found fragments of old, intercepted council bulletins mentioning the Talsin. The bulletins spoke of technological pacification and managed decline. Piece by piece, a story emerged. The Talsin had been like humanity, noisy, ambitious, expanding. They had been given the same choice: submit to guidance or be erased. They had chosen submission. The council governor had arrived. Over decades, their ships were grounded. Their advanced research was confiscated for safety. Their economy was integrated into the galactic whole, making them dependent. They were turned into children. Then a pathogen had swept through their homeworld. A simple virus, but one their now stagnant medical science, dependent on council-approved tech, could not adapt to fight. They had requested aid. The aid had been too slow, sadly insufficient. The Talsin were gone. A footnote, a lesson in why the council's peaceful guidance was necessary. It was not an attack. It was a slow, legal, bureaucratic murder. June compiled everything. He did not write a grand speech. He created a simple, factual dossier. Timeline, data matches, source citations. The story told itself. He sent it to the only person he thought might be able to get it through, an old university friend who now worked in diplomatic communications. The message was brief. For envoy Yuna Kim's eyes only. The truth about peaceful erasure. It's the story of the Talsin. He hit send. Then he sat back. Outside his window, the city of Taejun was in an uproar. News channels showed protests forming, governments arguing, people crying. Some voices, loud and scared, were already arguing for compliance. 200 years is not so long, they said. We can learn from them. June looked at the darkening sky. He thought of Min, floating in a tin can near Mars, who had seen the truth in the silent debris. He thought of the Talsin, who had chosen the safe path and been erased just as surely. The 30-day clock ticked in his mind. But now, for the first time, he wasn't just afraid of the choice. He was beginning to understand what the choice truly was. It was not between safety and risk. It was between existing on your own terms or being gently, peacefully led into a grave. Yuna's office in the temporary diplomatic quarters was a storm of paper and light. Screens covered the walls, showing news feeds, political analysis, and the grim, unchanging countdown. 27 days left. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. The arguments in the Security Council had devolved into shouting. The path ahead was darkness. Her aide, a young man named Tae, entered quietly. He looked nervous. Ma'am, a secured data packet. Highest priority. It bypassed normal channels. The sender, it's anonymous, but the encryption key is from the Taejun Advanced Materials Institute. Yuna rubbed her temples. Not now, Tae. I have the French ambassador in 10 minutes arguing for a pragmatic acceptance of a council liaison. It's about the Talsin, Tae said softly. The word cut through her fatigue. She looked up. Show me. The dossier that opened on her main screen was brutally simple. No emotion. Just timelines, spectral analysis graphs, data correlations, and translated fragments of council bulletins. It was the work of a scientist, not a politician. As she read, the cold feeling in her chest, the one that had started when the emissary spoke, spread through her entire body. Here was the proof. The peaceful erasure was not a moment, but a process. A slow, meticulous unwinding of a civilization. Submission was not salvation. It was the first step in a longer death. The final note on the Talsin pathogen was the coldest piece of all. The council medical assessment, attached as evidence, concluded the Talsin's own technological instability made aid ineffective. They had been blamed for their own extinction. Yuna stood up, her chair rolling back silently. Get me the heads of the Historical Archive and Exoarchaeology Division. Now, and find out who in Taejun sent this. While Tae worked, Yuna scrolled through the data again. The signature from the quiet graveyard debris field matched the scans from Min's Mars team. Her brother's name was in a footnote. This was not a theory. It was a case built with evidence. Within 2 hours, 3 tired-looking experts were in her office, their own tablets filled with the same data. They confirmed it. The correlations are too perfect to be false, the head exoarchaeologist said, her voice hushed with horror. We've seen fragments of this before, but never the full picture. They sterilized them. Yuna made a decision. We need to leak this. All of it. To every news agency, every public network, every social feed on the planet. Not through official channels. It needs to appear everywhere at once. It will cause panic, Tae warned. What we have now is a slower panic leading to surrender, Yuna said, her voice firm. This changes the choice. It makes it real. The leak happened in the dead of night, Greenwich Mean Time. It did not come from a government server. It appeared on academic forums, on engineering grids, on public astronomy databases. June's network had done its work. The dossier spread like a virus itself. By morning, the world was not just scared. It was angry. The change was visible in the news feeds on Yuna's wall. The talking heads arguing for caution were now shouted down. Interviews with historians connected the dots in plain language. They don't want to fight us, one said, her face grave. They want to unmake us. They want to turn off the lights, one by one, and say it's for our own good. Protests in the streets transformed. Signs that read, "Don't provoke them," were torn down. New ones appeared, hand-painted and brutal in their simplicity. We are not the Tulsan, and better T.O. break than T.O. bend. In her lab in Taejun, June watched the global reaction. He saw his data, his brother's discovery, become the fuel for a new fire. He felt no pride, only a heavy relief. The truth was out. Now humanity had to decide what to do with it. The special session of the UN General Assembly was called for that evening. The demand for it came from every corner of the globe. This time, the hall was not silent. It buzzed with a low, furious energy. The representatives were not just diplomats now. They were mirrors of their people's rage and desperate resolve. Yuna was called to speak first. She walked to the podium slowly. She did not have notes. She carried only a simple data disk containing the dossier. Her eyes swept the room, then looked into the main camera. 26 days ago, she began, her voice clear and carrying. We were given a choice, submit or be erased. We were told the erasure would be peaceful. We were told it was merciful. She held up the data disk. We have now seen the meaning of their mercy. It is the mercy of a gardener pulling up a weed. It is clean. It is quiet. And it is total. She slotted the disk. On the vast screen behind her, the key evidence appeared. The matching spectral signatures, the Talcin bulletins, the final, cold report. The choice was a lie, Yuna stated. No longer an envoy pleading a case, but a witness delivering testimony. There is no path that leads to us remaining who we are. One path leads to a quick death of the body. The other path leads to a slow death of the soul, followed by the body. They are not offering us a future. They are offering us two kinds of graves. She leaned forward, her hands on the podium. So we must reject the choice itself. A murmur rippled through the hall. They have threatened total war if we do not obey. They believe total war means fleets and bombs. They are wrong. Yuna's voice dropped, but every word was sharp as glass. We will now define it for them. We will give them our answer. Not as a plea. Not as a negotiation. As a proclamation. She looked directly into the camera lens, imagining the council's listening posts catching this raw, angry broadcast. Tell your masters, she said, her voice rising now, filling the silent hall, that humanity accepts their state of war. Tell them we proclaim our own. A total war of survival. Not on their terms. On ours. She stepped back. For a second, there was utter silence. Then the hall erupted. Not in chaos, but in a thunderous, unified roar of approval. It was a sound of defiance, born not from hope of victory, but from the absolute rejection of extinction. The proclamation had been made. The silence in the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Federation was profound. It was a different silence than the one on Earth. This was the silence of a vast, ancient machine, momentarily pausing in its endless function. The star map on the central dais glowed softly, each point of light a compliant species, a stabilized zone, a managed world. The human broadcast had been received, translated, and analyzed. It now hung in the air, the final words of Envoy Una Kim echoing in sterile, translated syllables. For a long moment, none of the three high arbiters spoke. They were beings of immense age and calm, their forms shrouded in light-modulating fields. "The reaction is illogical," Arbiter Vland stated, its voice a soft chime. "The data on the Talsin was regrettable, but its release has provoked irrationality." Fear was the anticipated response. "This is defiance. They have proclaimed a state of war," Arbiter Kadichar noted, a hint of clinical interest in its tone. "A species with no fleet, no strategic depth, no unified planetary government. It is a declaration with no tactical meaning. A gesture. It is a gesture that must be answered," said the third Arbiter Mrel. "The principle of order is paramount. If a nascent species can issue such a proclamation without consequence, the precedent is dangerous. The proclamation itself is a form of chaotic output." Their analysis was cool, detached. They saw a broken process, not a people. The human defiance was a flawed calculation, an error in the social engineering model. "The enforcement vessel sundial is at the edge of their system," Vland said. "It will proceed with the disarming protocol as scheduled. The display of orderly force will recalibrate their emotional response. They will see the futility." A decision was made. The proclamation was logged as a species-wide psychotic episode, temporary. The response would be a simple, peaceful demonstration of overwhelming power. A surgical strike against their orbital infrastructure, performed with perfect, clean technology. It would be a lesson in reality. On Earth, the word war was no longer an abstract concept. It was a frantic, global project. There were no grand parades, no rousing speeches about glory. Instead, there was a grim, focused energy. June sat in a crowded conference room, not in Taejun, but in an old hardened bunker beneath a mountain in Switzerland. He was no longer just an engineer. He was part of a new, unofficial group called the Continuity Workshop. His dossier had given them the why. Now they had to figure out the how. A woman named Lia spoke. She was a logistics programmer, known for designing the AI that managed Seoul's subway system. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. "They will target our network first. Our centralized power, communications, data hubs. So we stop being centralized." On a large screen, she displayed a new plan. It was not a weapons schematic. It was a blueprint for a cell-based society. Isolated habitats in deep caves under oceans in asteroid hollows, each capable of growing food, recycling air, and holding a complete copy of human knowledge, from how to smelt iron to how to perform heart surgery. The data would be stored on hardened crystal, not vulnerable servers. "They can dismantle our cities," Lia said, "but they cannot dismantle 1,000 seeds scattered across the solar system. Our war is to survive, not to take territory. Our weapon is our stubbornness." June saw his role. His knowledge of materials was needed for the habitats, for creating life support systems from scrap and rock. He nodded, already running calculations in his head. Meanwhile, in the Mars orbital station, Min and his fellow pilots were given new orders. Not from any Earth government, but from a collective command formed from military and civilian space crews. Their ships were not warships. They were tugs, surveyors, construction pods. Their mission was not to fight the sundial. It was to hide and to mark. "We can't hurt it," Min said over the encrypted channel to his squadron. "But we can show it we're not afraid. We can show it we're everywhere." His small pod, along with 5 others, left the station's dock. They didn't head towards the approaching council vessel. They moved like dust motes, drifting towards the asteroid belt. Their cargo was not missiles. It was canisters of June's new compound, a fine, magnetic dust mixed with a stable isotope that was uniquely Earth in signature. A calling card that would stick to any hull. On Earth, Una worked on a different front. The proclamation was just words. They needed to become a living idea. She spoke to filmmakers, teachers, musicians. "We are not just saving our lives," she told them. "We are saving our story. Our songs, our art, our bad jokes. We have to make it so that even if they erase our cities, they cannot erase what it means to be human." That is the heart of our total war. People listened. In every nation, individuals began digitizing family photos, recording grandparent stories, saving seeds from heritage crops. The war became cultural, personal. The Council's sundial finally entered the inner solar system. It was a beautiful, terrifying ship, shaped like a silver leaf. It moved in utter silence. It approached the main Earth-Moon traffic lane, where several large cargo stations and communication satellites orbited. Its weapons did not fire beams of light. They emitted a precise, field-based pulse. The targeted station simply came apart. Its metal skeleton unraveled at the seams. Modules separated gently, their systems shutting down. It was a clean, quiet, and horrifying demonstration of power, just like the Talsin artifacts. From the bridge of the sundial, the commander observed. "The lesson is delivered. Their defiance will collapse into practicality." At that moment, an alert chimed. A sensor scan showed a fine, almost invisible cloud of particles coating the sundial's starboard hull. It was biologically inert, non-corrosive, harmless. But the scan identified the isotopic signature. It was from Earth. It was a contaminant. Then, a simple, unencrypted radio transmission from one of Min's drifting pods in the asteroid belt pinged against their hull. It contained only 2 words, repeated in 100 human languages. "We see you." The commander of the sundial stared at the sensor readout showing the particulate stain. The human station had been dismantled perfectly. Yet this meaningless, dirty gesture was somehow more unsettling. The war, it seemed, had already begun in a way the Council did not understand. The Council's response to the dusting incident was a ripple of annoyance in a vast, calm pond. The sundial increased its passive scan intensity. It searched for hidden weapons, for fleet formations, for any sign of organized military resistance. It found only chaos, and chaos was harder to target than an army. On Earth, the chaos was a shield. June's work in the Continuity Workshop moved from theory to practice. His first major project was not a weapon but a library. Deep in a salt mine in Poland, a team used his designs to create a stable environment. They stored data cores, physical crystals, containing the sum of human knowledge. Next to them, in vaults designed to last millennia, were seeds, bacterial cultures, and simple toolmaking instructions. This was not a backup plan. It was a promise. A promise that an attack on the surface would not be a kill shot. Similar projects sprouted like mushrooms. In the deep ocean trenches, pressure-resistant habitats were anchored, powered by geothermal vents. In the Antarctic ice, tunnels were bored and stocked. The effort was not led by governments alone, but by networks of engineers, survivalists, and ordinary people. The proclamation had become a shared mission. Leah, the logistics programmer, faced a different problem. How do you coordinate a global resistance without a central computer to hack? Her solution was old and new. She helped design a system called the Candle Network. It used short-range, low-power radio transmitters, the kind used in simple walkie-talkies. Each transmitter could only reach the next one, passing messages along in a chain, like candles lighting each other in a dark hall. The messages were broken into tiny pieces, sent along different paths, and reassembled at the end. There was no headquarters to destroy. To silence the network, the Council would have to find and eliminate every single handheld unit on the planet. Up in the scattered outposts of the asteroid belt, Min and the other pilots were turning rocks into homes. They called them cradles. A cradle was not a military base. It was a hollowed-out asteroid, spinning for gravity with a small garden of algae and plants for air, and a workshop that could repair tools. They were hidden, fragile, and everywhere. Their only defense was that they were not worth the cost to find. A council ship would have to spend immense energy scanning and checking thousands of worthless rocks to find a few hundred people living inside. The sundial continued its mission of peaceful dismantling. It visited the shipyards orbiting Mars. With the same eerie pulse, it took apart the skeletal frames of half-built exploration vessels. It rendered the drive cores of docked ships inert, turning them into floating metal tombs. Min watched from a remote sensor pod, his fists clenched. It was a funeral for their dreams. But then he looked at the scanner. The sundial was being careful. It moved slowly, methodically. It was a gardener pulling weeds. It was not prepared for a forest that had decided to grow in 1,000 new directions. He opened a channel on the Candle Network's spaceband frequency. Sundial is finishing at Shipyard Alpha. It's heading towards the main communication relay at Lagrange Point 2. It will take it apart in 4 hours. On Earth, in a small apartment in Jakarta, a teenage girl named Sari heard the relayed message on her modified handheld unit. She was part of a different group, the Echoes. Their job was culture. She recorded a simple message on her unit. This is a recipe for my grandmother's rendang. You need beef, coconut milk, chili, and patience. She sent it into the Candle Network. The recipe was broken into packets and began bouncing across the planet, a tiny piece of identity refusing to be erased. The sundial reached the communication relay, a vital node for global data. It began its disassembly pulse. At the same time, 1,000 amateur radio operators on Earth, coordinated by nothing more than a whispered plan on the network, pointed their dishes at the sundial. They did not transmit data. They transmitted noise. They played music. They read poetry. They sent the sound of rainforests and laughing children. It was a wall of meaningless, chaotic sound, washing over the council ship's sensors. On the bridge of the sundial, the commander observed the disruption. It was not a jamming signal. It was not an attack. It was irrational noise. The ship systems filtered it out easily, but the fact of it was puzzling. The humans were not trying to stop the dismantling. They were insisting on being heard while it happened. They were saying, "We are still here." The commander filed a report to the council. Physical dismantling proceeding. Psychological profile inconsistent. Species is engaging in non-tactical, expressive resistance. This may prolong the pacification timeline. Back in the Swiss bunker, June received a new data packet. It was from a mining outpost on a distant asteroid. They had found a rare mineral, useless for weapons. But June saw its properties. It was stable, durable, and when processed, could store vast amounts of data in a microscopic format. He immediately began designing a new kind of archive, one small enough to be carried by a single person, but capable of holding a library. He showed the design to Lia. "We make millions of these. We scatter them. In caves, in ocean currents, in the soil. We become impossible to erase. We become a memory in the stones themselves." Lia smiled, a tired but real smile. "They think total war is about destruction. We are making it about persistence." The council had expected a fight they could win with superior technology. They were not prepared for a war where the enemy's goal was not to hold ground, but to become a ghost that could never be exorcised. A ghost that planted gardens in the dark and whispered recipes into the void. The proclamation was no longer just words. It was a virus of the human spirit, and it had found 1,000,000 hosts. Time, measured by the council's meticulous schedule, had passed. On Earth, they marked it in seasons. 2 years. The sundial and other ships like it had done their work. The great orbital shipyards were silent, skeletal gardens of dead metal. Major communication hubs were gone. The sky, to the naked eye, seemed a little emptier. But on the ground, life was not extinguished. It was burrowing deeper. The Candle Network flickered endlessly, passing messages about crop rotations in hidden hydroponic vaults, about medical tips, about the location of new council patrols. June's tiny data crystals, now called seeds, were being manufactured in basement workshops and smuggled everywhere. One was buried under the foundation stone of a rebuilt school in a remote village. Another was sealed inside a weather balloon and released into the jet stream. The council was growing frustrated. Pacification was not proceeding. Reports from Earth were a catalog of minor, maddening victories for the humans. A disassembled power grid would be replaced within weeks by a messy, decentralized web of geothermal taps and solar arrays that were too numerous and primitive to efficiently target. The Sundial's commander, now orbiting Jupiter to monitor the outer system, received a new, firm directive from the Arbiters. The human resistance is psychological. Their defiance is rooted in the belief their scattered elements cannot be cleansed. A demonstration of comprehensive reach is required. Select one of their cradle asteroids in the belt. Destroy it, not with a field pulse, with kinetic force. Make it vanish. Broadcast the result to all their channels. This will shatter the illusion of safety. The target chosen was designation 2547H, nicknamed Willow by its inhabitants. It housed 57 people, including families. It was not a military threat. It was a community, a garden in the rock. Its destruction would be a message. Nowhere is hidden. Min was on patrol in his small, stealth-coated scout pod when he saw the change in the sundial's energy signature. It was moving, not with its usual calm purpose, but with decisive speed towards the belt. His blood went cold. He knew that vector. It led to a cluster of cradles, including Willow, where a friend from his pilot training days lived with her young son. He sent a frantic pulse through the candle network. Sundial moving fast on bearing 7-4 Echo. Target likely Willow or adjacent. They are not in dismantle mode. Energy buildup suggests kinetic projectile. The warning shot through the network. On Willow they had minutes. The protocol was for scatter. Small, individual life pods, little more than engines and a bubble of air, were meant to flee in all directions. But they were slow, and the sundial could pick them off. On Earth, in the bunker, June and Leah saw the alert. There was nothing they could do to stop a rock from being smashed. But Leah had an idea. The broadcast. They want to broadcast the destruction to break us. So we broadcast something else. We flood every frequency, every dirty channel, with something else first. June understood. He accessed the Central Cultural Archive. Not the technical data, the human data. He selected files at random, a frantic, desperate collage. On Willow, the captain, a woman named Hannah, made a hard choice. Do not scatter. It's what they want. We stay. We turn every external camera towards the sundial. We open every microphone. We send them our faces. We send them the sound of our air recyclers, our children talking. We show them what they are about to kill. Min, can you get a close scan? Min, his heart hammering, angled his pod. He would be seen. He would be a target. He did it anyway. He pushed the throttle, racing not away, but towards the sundial's line of fire, his sensors aimed at Willow. The sundial fired. A sleek, tungsten rod launched at a fraction of light speed. It was a clean, simple weapon. It would turn the asteroid into a cloud of dust. In the seconds it traveled, 1,000 things happened at once. Min's pod recorded the calm, determined faces in Willow's viewports. Leah and June's team unleashed their digital flood. Across Earth and the surviving orbitals, every screen flickered. The kinetic rod struck. Asteroid 2547 H ceased to exist. The sundial immediately began broadcasting the clean, sensor-confirmed image of the asteroid's annihilation on all captured human frequencies. It was meant to be the final, silencing image. But human channels were already broadcasting. Before the image of the explosion could even be processed, people saw something else. They saw the faces from Willow, frozen in calm defiance, broadcast from Min's pod in the moment before impact. They heard a chaotic, overlapping soundtrack. A Korean folk song, a child reciting a poem in Spanish, the sound of waves on a beach, a chef explaining how to make bread. It was a cacophony of life. The council's clean image of destruction was immediately followed, on the same frequency, by a grainy, shaky video from Min's fleeing pod, showing the expanding debris cloud. And over it, his voice, raw with static and grief, saying, "Willow is gone. Record the names. Hannah, Leo, Sumin. Record them." The effect was not what the council intended. The destruction of Willow was not a clean, frightening lesson. It was a messy human tragedy. The council had shown they could destroy a rock. But the humans had shown what was on the rock. And they had shown they would remember. On the sundial, the commander reviewed the data. The tactical objective was achieved. The asteroid was destroyed. Yet, the human network was not silent. It was buzzing louder than ever, repeating the names of the dead, passing along the folk song that had been broadcast. The kinetic strike, meant to end resistance, had only given them a new song and a list of martyrs. The commander's report to the arbiters was uneasy. Target eliminated. However, the human cohesive response has intensified. The proclamation appears to be a social binding agent, strengthened by loss. Recommended course of action: reassess. Total physical eradication of the species across the solar system would require a resource commitment of unprecedented scale. The cost-benefit analysis is shifting. The war had reached its turning point. The Council could break anything they could find. But humanity had stopped being something you could simply find and break. They had become an idea, and ideas, once seeded, were infinitely harder to kill than stone. 10 years was nothing to the Galactic Council. A blink. To humanity, it was a lifetime. It was a generation born in deep bunkers who had never felt direct sunlight. It was 1,000 willows, remembered in quiet ceremonies on the Candle Network. The war was not over. It had simply settled into a terrible, quiet rhythm. Council ships still patrolled. They would find a surface settlement growing too large, too visible, and they would dismantle it with their clean, silent beams. The people would scatter, vanishing into tunnels or forests, and the next day, the Candle Network would hum with messages from them, reporting their location, asking for seed potatoes or medical advice. The physical loss was grieved. The spirit was not broken. On Earth, in a valley sheltered by high mountains, Una walked through a forest. It was not an old forest. It had been planted after the Proclamation, a project of biological memory. Every tree was from a different continent. It was lush, green, and defiantly alive. She was older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes held the same quiet fire. Nearby, in an open-sided workshop, June and Leah worked with a group of children. They weren't teaching advanced physics. June held up a small, smooth stone. "This is a seed," he told them. "Inside, smaller than a grain of sand, are 10,000 books, songs, and the instructions to build a water purifier. If you find one, you protect it. You learn from it. You copy it. You leave it for someone else." A girl raised her hand. "What if the council people find it?" June smiled a tired smile. "To them, it will look like a rock. It is our memory. We have hidden our memory in plain sight." Leah showed them a simple hand-cranked radio. "This is a candle. You listen. You pass messages. You are never alone." This was the heart of the new world. Not a grand victory, but a stubborn, endless continuation. In the asteroid belt, Min was no longer a young pilot. He was a coordinator. His scout pod was docked at a new cradle, this one hidden deep inside a carbon-rich asteroid. On his screen was a simple message, relayed through a chain of hidden buoys. It was a formal request from the council ship Eclipse, newly arrived at the edge of the solar system. It was addressed to the representatives of humanity. It requested dialogue concerning a mutually agreeable cessation of ongoing resource expenditure. They wanted to talk. The cost of enforcing their order had become too high. Not in ships lost, they had lost none, but in time, in energy, in political capital. Humanity was a problem that would not be solved, only managed in perpetuity, and the council's calculus finally found that inefficient. A council was gathered on the secure channel. Una, from her forest valley. June and Leah from the workshop. Min from the belt. Others from deep under the sea and ice. "They want to talk," Min said, his voice scratchy over the link. "We listen," Una said. But we do not go to them. They come to us, on our terms, on an open channel. The message was sent. To the surprise of many, the eclipse agreed. A new emissary, similar to the first but subtly different, appeared on the global broadcast. His tone was not commanding. It was diplomatic. People of Earth, it began. The period of stabilization has been costly for all. The Council proposes a new arrangement, a limited autonomy within your system, a cessation of disruptive expansion in return for a cessation of enforcement actions. It was an offer, a chance to stop, to breathe. The humans on the Council looked at each other across the vast distances. June thought of the Talsin who had accepted guidance and been erased. Lia thought of the fragile network of lights that was their civilization now, beautiful because it could not be centralized and controlled. Min thought of Willow, and the names he still recited every night. Yuna was the one who spoke. She faced the camera in her simple forest clearing, the living proof of their resistance growing behind her. "We have received your proposal," she said, her voice calm and clear. "We will consider it. But first, you must understand the situation you have created." She paused, and for a moment, she was not a diplomat, but the woman who had first faced their ultimatum. "You came to impose order. You threatened total war if we disobeyed. So we accepted your war." She leaned forward slightly. "You defined total war as a military action. We have defined it differently. It is the total commitment of a species to exist. You cannot win it. You can only decide how long you want to fight it. We will fight it forever." She reached down to a simple player and pressed a button. The first, static-filled words of her proclamation from a decade ago filled the transmission, echoing the emissary's own words back to them. "You have threatened our home. Therefore, by the will of humanity, we accept your state of war. This is a proclamation of total war." She let the old words hang in the air. Then she continued softly. "The war you started is now a part of us. It is in our children's lessons. It is in our buried seeds. It is in our scattered homes. You cannot cease it with a treaty. You can only leave and live with the knowledge that we are here, unbroken. The dialogue you request can only begin with your acknowledgement of that single fact. We are here and we will remain." She ended the transmission. There was no grand statement, just the quiet sounds of the wind in the man-made forest. On the bridge of the eclipse, the emissary's projection flickered out. The commander reviewed the data. The humans' words were not a rejection of the offer. They were a redefinition of the battlefield. The offer was meaningless because the war for humanity was no longer about the Council. It was about their own survival, and they had already proven they could do that alone in the dark. High above, in the Council chamber, the arbiters reviewed the report. The cost-benefit analysis finally tipped. The resource expenditure for total annihilation was now officially classified as infinite. The human problem was not solved. It was simply and permanently categorized as enduring. In the valley, Yuna turned from the camera. June and Lia went back to teaching the children how to read the data in a stone. Min looked at the stars, not with fear, but with the steady gaze of a man guarding his home. The Council had threatened Earth. Humanity had responded not by building a bigger weapon, but by becoming something that could not be eradicated. They had woven themselves into the fabric of their system, into stories, into memory, into the very dirt. The proclamation was not a challenge they had issued. It was the description of the new, unbreakable reality they had been forced to build. And they would tend to that reality, quietly and forever, long after the Council's ships were just a forgotten nightmare in their oldest songs.